10 seconds. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Bluestone Resources Live Investment Summit today, hosted by Six. I'm pleased to introduce our speakers for today. We have Jack Linden, CEO and Director, and Derek Klink, President and Director. Jack and Darren will walk us through a company presentation, and then we'll be accepting questions live. You could submit your questions at any time on the Q&A panel on the right-hand side of your screen. And as always, the summit is being recorded and will be available on Six.com afterwards. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to you, Jack.
Thank you very much, Dasha. I'm Jack Lundeen, the CEO of Bluestone Resources, and joining me today is Darren Klink, the President and Director of Bluestone. And it's an honor to be able to present here in front of everybody. And at the end of the presentation, there's going to be some time for questions and answers. So we look forward to a good discussion once we've gone through the slide deck. As I mentioned, we have some information to share with all of the audience here today. It's an exciting new development for this company and our flagship Cerro Blanco project located in southern Guatemala. I'm currently in Guatemala presenting to you, and over the next several slides here, we'll get into the details of our new strategy, and hopefully we'll be able to show that you are as excited as we are. So right now, I will be making some forward-looking statements, and therefore I do encourage any of you to go onto our company website, bluestoneresources.ca, and at that time you can read through our forward-looking statements and also get more information on the company and any new advancements on the project that we've been making. Before getting into the details of our flagship Cerro Blanco asset, I will just mention a little bit on our corporate structure. So we're listed on the TSX Venture Exchange. Our current share price is around $1.80 Canadian per share, which gives us a market cap of over 250 million Canadian. We've got about 45 million US in the bank today. And at the bottom of this slide here, you can see our major shareholder structure. So this is a Lundeen Group company. The Lundeen family is the majority shareholder. And pleasingly, we also have our partners at CD Capital as major shareholders as well. They were most recently big supporters and big shareholders of Lundeen Gold, which recently developed and is now operating its flagship Fruta del Norte project in southern Ecuador. This is a project that I was working on for 3.5 years prior to joining Bluestone last year in January 2020. We've got 5 analysts covering us with an average target price of around $4.30 a share. So a little bit on the history of our flagship asset. As I mentioned, this is located in southern Guatemala. We're about an hour and a half, 2 hours away from the capital city of Guatemala City. And this project was discovered, Cerro Blanco was discovered back in 1998. And it has passed through hands of several owners. And recently in 2006, when Goldcorp acquired Glamis, who at the time was the operator of Cerro Blanco, they quickly advanced this project into a permitting phase, and they were able to get an EIA permit for an underground development scenario, which contemplated a 1,000 ton per day underground high-grade operation. Since then, a lot has changed. We've enhanced our understanding of the project, of the deposit Cerro Blanco. And fast forward to May 2017, when Bluestone Resources acquired Cerro Blanco from Goldcorp for a price of 20 million US. At that time, we brought in our geology team to remap and redefine the deposit, and we effectively began drilling the deposit in 2018, and we really haven't stopped drilling since. We currently today have 5 rigs drilling the surface portion of the deposit, and we'll get into those details later. But since the time of the acquisition of Cerro Blanco, we have significantly enhanced our understanding of the geology of the project, of the community surrounding the project, and therefore in 2020, when I came in January of last year, the task was to bring the project forward through the feasibility study that was released back in 2019 on this project and go through basic engineering and basically develop a blueprint for the development and operation of an underground concept. However, over the last year, with the successful drilling that we had in 2020, where we drilled over 15,000 meters, we were noticing that there was an opportunity here to look at the project in a different lens. The fact is that there's near surface mineralization and that we do have continuous long grading holes that come from surface that we were presenting to the market towards the end of last year. And at that time, we were able to really look at the details of this project, of the geology, along with the project team that we brought in to look at the basic engineering and all of the details associated to Cerro Blanco. And the simple fact is that with an underground scenario, we would be missing out or sterilizing approximately 1.5 million ounces of gold. And therefore, at the time in Q4 last year, we decided to put a small team together to look at the opportunity of developing an open pit scenario. So from a technical and economic standpoint, we were able to understand very quickly that this was a very attractive project when looking at it through a new development scenario. But also another important factor for us was to understand the appetite for a project of this scale in this part of the country. So we'll get into those details later on, but really it was towards the end of last year that we decided to come together and put a team looking at advancing with a preliminary economic assessment on the open pit, but in parallel to that, finishing our basic engineering for the underground scenario to ensure that we had all options available to us. Now, this is a picture here of the block model in situ for the open pit. The measured and indicated resource does go from 1.4 million ounces to 3 million ounces when you're comparing the underground to the open pit. And what you can see here is the geometry of the deposit. And if I draw your attention to the cross section on the right side of the slide here, you can see that the geometry of this deposit is essentially like an upside down cone. The feeder veins coming from depth flare out and mineralization does go to surface. So we classify this as an upward flaring vein array. And really what you're seeing here is that this is a deposit very amenable to open pit mining. The grade here that you're seeing, so the pink in the screen is our high grade core, which is over 10 grams per ton. But there is typical low grade mineralization, which is tightly held outside of that high grade core. And the grades range from 0.3 to 1.5 grams per ton on the exterior of this deposit, but they quickly go into around 1 to 5 grams per ton before getting into those high grade veins. So there's very attractive mineralization outside of those high grade veins. And this is why we believe the opportunity to go for an open pit makes the most sense for us because of the way in which this deposit was formed and because of the understanding and the team that we have in place now. However, that's only one side of the coin. For us to feel confident in driving a project forward, such as this surface mining operation at Cerro Blanco, our commitment to the local and national stakeholders is and will continue to be very strong. And we have engaged with the various ministries to discuss the opportunity that we see here to make a bigger project, but also to eliminate a lot of the technical challenges that were associated with the underground. The underground scenario did have complexities to it, mainly around the fact that this is a hot springs environment, meaning there will be hot water inflows that need to be mitigated with the underground concept. And you can mitigate those through ventilation, cooling, and specific rotations. And that we did significantly de-risk in the underground scenario, but going with an open pit, yes, we will still have to manage the hot water. However, it is much less technically challenging as associated to the underground. And this means that we can focus more on local training and local hiring. And together with our partnership with the Lundin Foundation, which is a nonprofit organization we established in 2006 to come alongside mining companies to help establish a strong local presence, we believe that we can put the right systems in place to maximize the benefits not just for the company, but for the communities as well. So our focus will be on local training, local hiring, local procurement, and as well economic diversification in the area. Because the reality is not everybody will be working at the mine, but we want to maximize the benefits by building capacity in other trades so that people can benefit in other areas where this mine is located. Going back briefly to what this means by going from our previous concept to the new mining method. Essentially what we've been able to do is double the resource for gold, triple the resource for silver, and that translates to doubling and tripling the production for gold and silver. But because we're moving those technical challenges, we've essentially increased the value of the project at a net present value using a 5% discount after tax by more than 3 times. And this is really what drove us to really look at the opportunity and really look at our strategy and
looks like Jack might have just froze there. I might just step in here just to cover off while he pops back on. As he was mentioning, he's dialing in from Guatemala City, so sometimes the coverage is a little bit intermittent. So Jack was just referring to here. Jack, are you back?
I am back there.
Yeah, go ahead. We just lost you there for a split second. Keep going.
Okay. Well, I'll talk to this slide and then I'll hand it over to you pretty soon here. But if you lose me again, then please take over. But essentially what we're saying here is by going from the underground to the open pit scenario, we're doubling the resource and production and tripling the value of the project by reducing and removing a lot of those technical risks. Darren, I'll hand it over to you to talk through the new production profile.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks, Jack. So good morning, good afternoon, everyone. This slide here talks a little bit about the mine plan and what it looks like. As you can see, I mean, it increases the production by twofold as far as gold goes, as Jack mentioned. It's a key aspect of it because in our permit and in our relationship and with the Republic of Guatemala, of course, trying to extract and maximize the value of what Mother Nature put there is an important aspect. And so this new approach to extracting the resource takes full value of it. You can see it generates very strong free cash flows in the early years of the life, which will be important in order to pay back the project finance. Ultimately, we would expect to put a project finance facility to finance this project, and of course, it's necessary to have robust economics in order to pay that back. So great all-in sustaining costs. It'll generate a good margin in order to pay that back, and very strong free cash flows, as you can see, over an initial 11-year mine life. And as you can see, I mean, from a production perspective, when we compare it to the previous project with the underground approach, there's really only 1 year that drops below. That's the last year, the 110,000 ounce range, which was about the average of production over the initial underground approach. This slide here is a summary of the broader sort of economics. You can see an NPV approaching $1 billion at $1,550 gold. The initial capex of around $550 million. And quite a robust IRR at 28.5%. Peak production, 334,000 ounces of gold. You saw that on the previous slide. Really years 2, 3, and 4 are all north of 300,000 ounces of gold production. This is a significant deposit in Latin America, and there's not too many of these that are still remaining. So it's a great opportunity for the people of Guatemala. And our local stakeholders in Jutiapa and Ascension Mita. I think importantly as well, when you think about that broader and that longer mine life and the increased employment, as Jack talked about, all the indirect opportunities that will come from this. for Ascension, Mita, Jutiapa, Guatemala. The overall contribution to the economy, when you think about that, is actually approaching $2 billion. And that's significant. That definitely moves the needle, and is something that's resonated very well with our local stakeholders. This slide here looks at some of the peer companies. So for those of our guests that are on that perhaps follow the space, the top slide looks at the head grade of the deposit along with the strip ratio, and this is another unique feature of this project. You can see it's one of the lower strip ratios, meaning we don't really need to move that much rock in order to extract the gold. And yet it's got a very good grade as well. And part and parcel, I think, with the fact that, as Jack said, it was discovered in 1998, and for a variety of reasons, it was within a larger company that it really just didn't get the love, so to speak, the priority. And now with the significant investment that we've made here over the last couple of years, we've got it to a position that ultimately we feel will unlock the maximum value for our stakeholders. When you look at the next slide below, or the next table chart, I guess, you can see the production profile against the market cap of the company. And so ultimately, this is a big change for us, and it's something that's been well thought through. But it screens fairly well when you look at the peer companies that are out there. There's just not many development companies that have got an asset that potentially is going to be producing here over the next 3 to 4 years at north of 200,000 ounces at these sorts of valuations. So you can see there's plenty of opportunity for the valuation of the company for its stakeholders to significantly move up as we continue to move through 2021. And I'll throw it over to Jack to talk a little bit about the timeline, and then we'll be open for questions.
Thanks, Darren. You can hear me okay?
Yeah, you bet.
Okay, good. Apologies for the connection here, but we do have a busy schedule ahead of us to continue advancing with this concept. We did complete the PEA, which we released the results of that around a week and a half ago. Because of the work that we've done on the underground, a lot of the detail in the engineering was transferable to the open pit concept. So this PEA is much more detailed than you would typically see with a PEA, and therefore we're able to advance right into a feasibility study that will form our bankable feasibility study and the blueprint for our development and operation at Cerro Blanco. In parallel to working through the technical aspects of the project that will feed into the feasibility study, we are also gathering environmental and social baseline data currently, and that will go into an environmental impact assessment that we will be submitting to the Ministry of Environment prior to the end of the year. So in parallel to the feasibility study and the permitting process, we are now working through a project financing package. As I mentioned before, we've got about $45 million US in the bank, which will comfortably get us through 2021. But working on that strategy for the project financing package with the initial capital is $550 million. So we'll be working with likely a combination of a debt facility, potentially a stream for our silver. And then as we're working through our budgets for 2022, prior to getting into the construction phase, we will understand what our total funding requirement is later on this year. In addition to all of that, the focus for us is to get ourselves efficiently into the construction phase. And we're targeting end of 2022, early part of 2023 to start that early works campaign. And it is around a 20-month construction timeline. So towards the back end of 2024 or early part of 2025, we see ourselves getting into the production phase for this new concept. So a lot of work ahead of us, but we've got the team in place, and we now have the confidence and the support with our local national stakeholders, our board, and our project execution team to drive this project forward in what we believe the right way, which is through surface mining at Cerro Blanco. So with that, I think we can open up the floor for questions and hopefully have some good discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Jack. I see there's a few questions that are coming through here on the chat board, so maybe we can kick one off. And the first question is really around the unique opportunity at Cerro Blanco with the geothermal project. Can you talk a little bit about that and what the plans are with regards to the ability for renewable energy?
For sure. So in the adjacent license to the Cerro Blanco project, we have what's called the Mita Geothermal project. And this is an area where we are licensed to generate up to 50 megawatts of renewable energy through this geothermal project. And for us, I mean, that is definitely a unique opportunity where we can potentially offset some of the power that would be required from the grid, but also potentially sell into the grid as well. So this is something that we will be driving in parallel to advancing with Cerro Blanco. And I do see an opportunity for us to really establish ourselves as, you know, from an ESG standpoint, industry leading when we have a project like this that can offset some of our power requirements. So we're very excited about the Mita Geothermal project, and we intend to advance it in parallel. But at the moment, we do have a big focus on getting ourselves building that momentum on the gold project.
Okay, thanks, Jack. And maybe just combining a couple of questions here that are very similar, one from Dennis and one from Dave. Can you talk a little bit about, you know, like the feedback, I guess, so far from the national government, local communities so far with regards to this change?
Yes, and that's obviously very important for us, because before we decided that we were comfortable with moving forward with the open pit concept, we did ramp up our engagement with the local community members and as well with the various ministries here. So we've spoken to the Ministry of Environment, the Ministry of Energy and Mining, the Minister of Economy, and talked about this new opportunity and really talked through any of the concerns that they may have or any of the questions that they may have, both technical and non-technical, to really gauge if there was an appetite for a project of this scale in this part in Guatemala. And the feedback was strong, hence why we're going forward with this new concept. And, you know, additionally, we do believe that engaging with both local and national stakeholders through this permitting process to make it much more of a partnered process, rather than going away, putting together the document, submitting it, and waiting for the clarifications or observations. We intend to do this in a much more transparent way, so that when we do submit the EIA document, the environmental ministry is well aware of the information that's going in there. And also we will have our team willing to work through any observations immediately as they come our way. So, you know, that is for us a big focus prior to pivoting and making such a strategic change that we have done now.
Thanks, Jack. There's a couple, I think we must have a couple process engineers and metallurgists on the call today, so that's great. Kenny and Fraser, maybe I can just quickly answer these ones. Just a question around the material handling and the process plant layout along with the flow sheet. So just to answer that, this is a pretty straightforward deposit from a metallurgical perspective. So it's low sulfidation epithermal, and really a dream from that perspective. You would have seen that in the PEA, we have assumed a 91% recovery for gold and 85% for silver. Obviously, with the bigger tons and bringing in some of that lower grade material, we have reduced the overall recoveries from 95 on the gold to 91. But this is pretty straightforward. So it's crush, grind, and leach. We've also committed to going to a dry stack filter tails facility as well, which is important, and definitely the trend, I think, within the industry this year, or perhaps over the last number of years. And then the question from Kenny around whether or not pressure oxidation is required, and no, it's not. Again, low sulfidation epithermal, so no need for autoclaves or roasters of anything. So this is about as straightforward as it gets. Another question here, Jack, for you. With the projected amount of free cash for the project, you know, what's the long-term plans for Bluestone, and do we have any plans to consider mergers and acquisitions?
Thanks, Darren. So we're always open to discussing what makes sense, if there's potential for mergers or acquisitions, or for us to, you know, build out the company through inorganic growth. and we do remain attentive to any opportunities that come our way in that field. But for us right now, we're laser focused on advancing and getting this feasibility study completed, getting our EIA submitted, and moving forward with building that momentum and continuing to drive forward Cerro Blanco. When we get into production, yes, we're going to be generating significant free cash flow, which is of course why we're in the business, to make sure that we can build a profitable business. And at that time, I think it gives us the opportunity to put more money in the ground and look at expanding the resource, but also with the exploration that we have, there's some potential attractive targets to the north of Cerro Blanco, and we do intend on following up. Hopefully we can follow up on these targets prior to getting ourselves into production, but there is a 2-kilometer northerly trend that has some pretty attractive targets. In fact, in 2005, Glamis, or pre-2005, Glamis drilled a few holes that have some near surface high-grade intervals that we definitely intend to follow up on. And that would mean that there's a potential for some satellite pits to continue feeding what would be the Cerro Blanco processing facility.
Okay, we got another question here from Dave as to the opportunity to go underground after the surface mine has been mined. Has there been any deeper holes in those two areas, below what'll be the surface mine?
So the resource does extend at depth, and right now the final pit is designed to the lowest working production level that was in the underground. So right now we are able to achieve the depths that we were contemplating for the underground. But yes, there is high-grade feeder veins that form the Cerro Blanco deposit, and therefore there is a potential to go underground at the end of the mine life. And we'll look to realize that potential likely when we're in production and drilling deeper holes.
Okay. And a follow-up to the slide that we've got up here on slide number 11, just talking a little bit about, maybe in a little bit more detail, the permitting. So, going from an underground EIA to an open pit surface mine EIA, just maybe a little bit more clarity around how that works and the process.
Certainly. So as I mentioned, we had an EIA approved in 2007. That was by Goldcorp, ran that process. And that was the permit that we were going to be going into the development phase for the underground scenario. Now, obviously, with a new project, bigger project, new mining method, we will have to achieve a new permit. A new EIA document will need to be submitted, which we intend to do by the end of this year. And that process is very well defined. We have engaged with a local consultant here that has experience in doing these environmental impact assessments and submitting them to authorities for various industrial projects in the country, including energy, renewable energy, and mining. And therefore, the timeline that we built out was in consultation with our third-party vendors here to support driving that forward. And we do have experience in permitting in this country because we've had to amend and work through various permitting processes for the previous concept. So we know that it's a well-defined process. And as I mentioned, we'll be working with the Ministry of Environment so that our engagement is strong, so that we can hopefully have as efficient as a process as possible, but also our commitment to providing accurate and detailed information will help us to make this process more efficient as well. And that's why we are continuing to work with the project team that's now been here for over a year to drive that process forward.
There's a couple more questions here on the prospectivity. So really kind of asking about, given the fact that this seems to be very geologically prospective, and it's really only been in the last couple of years, I guess, since Bluestone's got involved, that they've really been able to better understand it. What do you believe the prospectivity is outside the current resource, and what are the drilling exploration plans for this year?
At the moment, we have 5,500 meters budgeted for the upper Salinas unit of the deposit. That will hopefully increase our measured and indicated resource, and that again will all go into the update for the feasibility study. So that's our plan for 2021. We are looking at the potential for exploration, as I mentioned, to the north. There are some attractive targets around the Cerro Blanco deposit, which are in the current license that we control. So for us, advancing with Cerro Blanco feasibility study and permitting is priority, but if we can put together a small exploration campaign to see if there are those real opportunities for satellite pits, then we'll definitely do that. But right now we don't have in the budget for more exploration other than the infill drilling on the existing resource. 2022, however, we may look at putting together a small package for that because there is definitely some attractive prospectivity in the area.
Yeah, and just a follow up to that, which maybe I can quickly answer from Christian. Thanks for your question, Christian. Just in terms of whether or not the previous intercepts in the Salinas were assayed for gold or were veins assayed only, and then also with the 5 rigs turning, are these infill exploration or expansion holes? And then the third question is just around the new economics, the low grade thick mineralization. Does it mean there's more regional upside potential? So actually in early 2019, when we put out the feasibility study, you'll have seen there was a bulk tonnage resource that was done as well. And so that lower grade, kind of silicified cap was known about before. The drilling right now is a mix both of infill, and we do expect that we should be able to extend and increase the resource, no doubt, based on what we're seeing. And then, with regards to the third point, I think Jack's kind of addressed that as well. No doubt, this will increase opportunities for us as we look along the trend. It's pretty clear, when we arrived in 2017, because this was a project that hadn't really had a lot of love, and in fact, for almost 4.5 years, it had been dormant. There hadn't been a geologist on site. And so when we arrived and really kind of took the geologic model and focused a lot on the mapping and the sampling and really getting into the underground and kind of comparing it to what the geologic model that we were presented with was showing, we were finding that there was actually quite a bit of difference. And so we've almost turned it on top of its head. And then, really with the drilling work that we've been able to do over the last 2.5 years, we've got a very strong sense in terms of where those structures are that are carrying the gold. And now with this disseminated material at surface, obviously there's plenty of potential as we go along the structure, and as Jack said as well, potentially at the end of the open pit, from an underground perspective, it's coming from somewhere, but plenty of work to do there yet. Jack, another question here, just with regards to the underground water at the mine. So, are we going to use dewatering wells or sump pumps in the tunnels? How are we going to tackle the water in the later years of the mine life?
So we're going through this in much more detail as we're advancing the feasibility study, but water management is one of our primary focus areas. And right now, what we're contemplating is a combination of dewatering and injection wells. But one thing that we're also looking at is capitalizing on the opportunity that we have with the fact that there is already underground infrastructure in place. We've got about 3 kilometers of underground lateral development, and about 50% of the current resource resides above those underground workings. What that means is we'll likely be able to use those underground workings as our primary dewatering level for the first 2 to 3 years of operation. So things like this are really the detail that we want to get into for the feasibility study to see how we can, minimize costs and maximize the existing infrastructure that's already in place. But of course, water management and water treatment is a primary focus for us on the technical side.
Question here from shareholder of Bluestone, Victor. Thanks for joining, Victor. And you just asking if we have any thoughts with regards to the market pricing of BSR. Obviously, the analysts have upgraded their targets now on the back of this robust project. Recognizing that the past 7 months have been a bit of a consolidation period in the precious metals space, but do we feel that the market's concerned about Guatemalan geopolitical risk, or concern around the ability to get project financing for the project, for example?
Well, I think right now we do have significant upside potential for the share price. Obviously, when you look at our valuation, I think we're still being valued at the NAV of the underground, and considering that we have tripled the value of this project with this new concept, I think there's a lot of room for us to grow. As well, the gold space right now, there has been a bit of a correction taking place, but I remain bullish on the long-term perspective for gold. I think that the pandemic hasn't fully run its course yet, and our understanding of the true economic impact of the pandemic will show that there is still some uncertainty, and gold is looked at as a safe haven asset, and I do believe that it will prevail in the future. So I think there's a combination right now that is putting a bit of pressure on the share price, but there is a lot of upside potential. Of course, when it comes to other risks associated, so project financing will be a big catalyst for us. Getting the EIA will be another catalyst. The feasibility study for us as well, once we can demonstrate that we've now got a bankable feasibility study and a blueprint to get ourselves through the development phase and into the operations phase. And geopolitically, of course, I mean, there are questions that we do get asked on operating here in Guatemala. And while we can't speak for other mining companies in the country, our engagement here is strong, and we definitely intend to build on the engagement that we've had over the past 1 to 3 years. And I think that there is a window of opportunity for us to advance this project, and that's why we're here. That's why I'm spending all of my time in the city and at the site to continue engaging and understanding kind of where the concerns may be and where the risks are. And in this business, you have to have proper risk management, and we do have the team in place to manage and mitigate any type of risk that is faced, both technical and non-technical, for the project. So we're very confident that we can bring this project forward, and we're going to do everything we can to advance responsibly and efficiently for Cerro Blanco.
Thanks, Jack. Gordon was asking here around our links with the Discovery Group and assistance from the Discovery Group. Do you want to maybe just talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So we have the benefit of having two strong groups supporting this project and this company. The Discovery Group, which is founded by John Robbins, is a group that really understands the early stage development and what it's needed to drive the project forward in those early years. And so we've leveraged off of the experience. Our chairman is John Robbins, and he's, as I mentioned, he is the founder of the Discovery Group. We've also got the Lundin Group to support us as well in driving this project forward. And in the Lundin Group, we have experience in developing and operating. So when you combine the skill sets of both groups, it does give us an opportunity to leverage off a very large pool of experience that can, gives us good ideas and gives us the support needed when we need it to tackle tricky questions or to tackle any kind of strategic management that sometimes we require in the company. So this is for us a big differentiator for Bluestone, having two strong, prominent groups supporting us.
Okay, and I think we've got another metallurgist on the call here asking about the recovery. So Adolfo, thanks for the question here around the gold recovery and really the process flow sheet. So crush, grind, and leach, there'll be carbon and pulp is based on what we're looking at right now. Obviously, there'll be an opportunity to do some optimization work on that as we get through the feasibility study. But again, fairly straightforward. The recoveries are assumed at 91% for gold and 85% silver. So there's about 10 million ounces of silver that'll be produced over the life of the mine. And then, as you would have seen, around 2.5 million ounces of gold. But yeah, straightforward from a metallurgical perspective so far. The grinding right now is kind of a P80 to around 50 microns. We will look at opportunities to perhaps coarsen that up, but that's all part and parcel with some of the work that'll be going on here over the next few months.
And Darren, just to add to that, I mean, this is where we can go back to the fact that the flow sheet is very similar to what we had for the underground concept, meaning that a lot of that basic engineering that we completed is transferable to this new scenario, and that's why there is a lot more detail in this preliminary economic assessment that you would traditionally see in a PEA. That's why we can rapidly advance through a feasibility study. So, the fact that we're producing 100% doré bars operationally is very attractive for us, and a good opportunity here for us as well.
Okay. Well, I think that brings an end to the questions we so far got online here, Jack. So I think we can probably just close it off.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. Thanks for all of those questions, and thanks for the participation.